Dean Martin, the king of cool, the man with a glass of scotch in one hand, and a grin that could melt any crowd. He made it all look effortless. The jokes, the charm, the velvet voice. But one night, during a live TV appearance that fans will never forget, Dean's legendary persona began to crack. What unfolded on screen that evening was both shocking and revealing. A glimpse behind the mask of a man who lived his life between laughter and loneliness. For decades, Dean Martin was the picture of effortless cool. Whether alongside Jerry Lewis in their wild comedy duo or crooning solo hits like Everybody Loves Somebody, Dean had charisma that couldn't be faked. On stage and screen, he was always in control, smooth, witty, and unbothered. His drunk act was famous. The slurred words, the swaying stance, the ever-present drink. But what audiences didn't realize was that sometimes it wasn't an act, it was the late 1960s, and Dean was one of the biggest stars in the world. The Dean Martin Show was a national hit, a mix of comedy, music, and celebrity guests that felt spontaneous, chaotic, and completely entertaining. But on one fateful night, viewers noticed something different. Dean seemed off. His speech was slower, his timing a little too loose, his jokes wandering into confusion. At first, the audience laughed, thinking it was part of his trademark routine. But as the minutes passed, the laughter grew uneasy. The cameras kept rolling. Dean stumbled through his lines, forgetting names, mixing up lyrics, and leaning heavily on his co-stars. Crew members behind the scenes whispered nervously, unsure whether to cut to commercial. Viewers at home were torn. Was this just Dean being Dean, or had something gone terribly wrong? Eventually, one of his longtime friends on set stepped in, gently guiding him off stage under the pretense of a quick break. The audience applauded, masking their discomfort. What they didn't see was the turmoil behind the curtain, the exhaustion, the pressure, and the quiet sadness that Dean carried like a shadow. Dean Martin had always joked about drinking, turning it into part of his public persona. But off camera, the truth was more complicated. Though he wasn't the heavy drinker people imagined, he did struggle with loneliness and emotional pain. The constant touring, the spotlight, the failed marriages, they all took a toll. And when the cameras were off, Dean often retreated into silence, shutting out even his closest friends. After that infamous TV night, rumors spread fast. Some said he was battling burnout. Others whispered that his drunk act had finally caught up with him. But Dean himself refused to explain. When asked about the incident in later interviews, he simply smiled and said, "Everybody loves somebody sometime, just not all the time." It was classic Dean, charmingly evasive, hiding heartbreak behind humor. Privately, he was deeply affected. That moment made him reflect on how much of his life had become performance, how the line between the real man and the entertainer had blurred. He loved his audience, but he was tired of pretending. In the years that followed, Dean began stepping away from Hollywood. He still performed occasionally, still smiled for the cameras, but his energy was fading. Friends noticed he became quieter, more withdrawn. The tragic death of his son, Dean Paul Martin, in 1987 shattered what little spirit he had left. The man who once made the world laugh now spent most of his days in solitude, haunted by loss. That live TV appearance, once dismissed as a funny mishap, now feels like a metaphor, a glimpse into the exhaustion and sadness hiding behind the charm. For decades, Dean Martin gave the world laughter and love songs, but his greatest performance may have been pretending he was always okay. In the end, that night wasn't just about a drunk act gone wrong. It was the unraveling of a legend, a reminder that even the coolest man in the room can be quietly fighting his own battles. Dean Martin's smile never faded, but behind it was a man who carried more pain than anyone realized. So when you watch that live moment today, knowing what came after, it hits differently. The jokes, the sway, the laughter, they're tinged with sadness. Because now we know the truth. Dean Martin wasn't just acting drunk. He was drowning in a world that demanded he always look happy.